Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production and pretty much anything else we feel like, whatever people ask questions about. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about what would you get if you had $5,000 for a studio. We talked about $20,000 last week, and there was a request. Tony requested that we aim a little differently. So we're gonna go down to 5,000 and talk about what we would get and what we think are useful in those areas. Tomorrow, of course, we'll have Office Hours 2.0 update and talk about what's happening there. And then on Friday, we're gonna talk about how to get the most out of Office Hours. We do this every once in a while to make sure everybody kind of understands what's all there. Saturday, of course, is the long day. We have education, which is such a great conversation. Now, it's not on YouTube, 8 to 10 a.m. And then at noon, of course, we're going back to Todd Reynolds' house using the Belfast Method. So we'll be doing a remote takeover of Todd's house and streaming out to YouTube, and you'll get to see the behind the scenes. There's a link that gets sent out with all the other emails that we send out in the morning. So check that out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we got?
Good morning, all. Our first one comes this morning from Douglas Carmichael. No, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong screen here. Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. And Tony asks, I believe Chris Fenwick has gotten a new camera. What did he get and how does he like it?
Chris?
I got the one that Alex likes and I like it.
There you go.
I struggled with it for a long time. And I really wanted to live by the buy once, cry once philosophy. And there are a lot of solutions in the, $500 range, and they look good. And many people will know that, will tell you, I've asked them, hey, so what camera are you using? What camera are you using? But I really bought into the ability to, control it remotely through the ATEM.
And you already had an ATEM.
Yeah, I've been using the ATEM for recording for a long time. So that logic made sense, and there's a whole lot of logic behind the buy once, cry once. And so I used a Brio for a year and a half, and I'm very happy with this so far. I mean, you tell me, does it look okay?
Looks great. Yeah, it looks really good. So well done. What lens are you using?
Sigma 1.8, something to something. It was the one Rotem recommended. In retrospect, I think the thing I would have done differently is I would have looked a little harder for one that I could control the zoom. I had forgotten that was a possibility. I hate the fact that I knew something, but then I forgot it. So it's a testament for like writing things down. But when I opened up the control panel and I saw the zoom button, I was like, oh.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any EF lenses that you can control the zoom. I think they're all
exactly
the
one, but it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
How much is it, Jason?
$3,000, something like that.
And then also I will remind all, because I had forgotten, I stumbled across it. When you're in the ATEM control, I'm trying to think, can I show this easily? I can't. When you're in the ATEM control panel, camera tab, there is an extra button up so that you have it opens it up. So you have all three wheels. You also have the saturation control. And that's very handy. The color profile, let me double check something before I say this. Yeah, this color setting is one that Charles helped me with one night. And my takeaway was, I am just a very pink human being.
Very good.
And it's worse in the summer when I'm sunburned.
Yeah. Chris, you got to say it. You didn't say it. You said the one Alex likes.
The Blackmagic 6K Pro.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, good guy.
I didn't want to say it. Thanks, Tony.
Good guy.
I was just going to say that, you give up some clarity by using those lenses that can zoom. And so in the ATEM software control, you do have the DVE where you can punch in through the run to. You can set up the macro, so you can do a keyframe on A and B if you want. So you could just zoom in that way. So I'll use that every once in a while to punch in. So you've got a little bit of resolution there to play with. And so that extra clarity, I mean, the clarity at zooming into 1.2 or 1.3, versus a crappy lens that zooms. I mean, I'd rather just do it in the hardware. So
yeah, as it turns out, it's this far from me. If I want to reach up and do a Casey Neistat snap zoom, I could do that. But it's fine. The mounting of it was not insignificant. I've shown a few people on After Hours. I don't think it's worth going into it here. But I ended up putting a pole, drilling a hole in the desk, a pole to mount a couple of additional monitors for my record setup. And then a guy very astutely recommended a magic arm and a Manfrotto clamp and stuff like that. And I got to say, Guy, I go back to the conversation we had that day. I was in the state of mind, like I don't like cameras. I don't want to be a camera guy. They annoy me. And at a certain point, it's just like, just tell me what to get. Okay. I don't want to play around. And I know this isn't the Guy Cochran show, but I'm telling you, having defined setups and say, just get this. Many people like myself will play that game. And I know the DVE store, if you go DVE store /office hours, I believe there's a whole list of things that we have talked about over time. And again, I'm not trying to do a commercial, but I appreciate Guy and his dedication to this group. But having a, here's your $1,000 setup, here's your $5,000 setup, here, it's makes it much easier for those, because if you think about it, we're nerds, okay? We enjoy this stuff, except for me, who hates the cameras. And so it's a game. It's fun. But if you're just a teacher or just an executive, you don't want to delve into all of these things. Just tell me what to get. Just tell me. I'll get it. Make me look good. Well, I'll be happy.
And you want someone to tell you what to get, who knows what they're talking about and who has used it for a period of time. I think that one of the problems you get into with tests, I've been trying to buy a couple things on Amazon and there's a lot of people that tested a bunch of products and they list which one is the best. And then you see the reviews and they're all like, after 2 months, it broke, like it works great. And then after 2 months, it broke. And a lot of us have been using these day in, day out for years. And so I think that that's a different experience as well. Different knowledge base.
Yeah. But I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it's great.
Buy once, cry once.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
So yeah, Chris, I think you showed me it was the Sigma Art lens, which there's a difference. And yes, it's a great lens. And then the other question that because you do really good training videos, the settings or the presets between the camera and the ATEM, that's kind of a magical black magic art. So I'd love to have your understanding of how you actually made it work and watch your lips move.
What's interesting is that there's been so many people that have gotten on and had the coffee look, and like Alex is like, we have to fix your camera. I didn't remember the actual buttons to hit, but I remembered that, oh yeah, there's some things. And I gotta say, I got it set right pretty quickly, except for the pink face. And so, but it was just from hearing Alex walk people through the settings on the back. I will say, mounted up against the wall like this, which I hate, doing anything on the camera is an act of God. It's ridiculous because it's literally right up against a wall. And
well, that's why you need to have, and that's why the Bluetooth and all the other stuff. I mean, that's where all the stuff comes into play, is that you're not stuck with it. Yeah.
But I did find I believe a guy, you answered the question a week or two ago. I put on the, turn the screen off after a minute setting. So it's currently off. But the camera's on 24/7.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Charles Silverman in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And Charles asks, can the panel recommend any collapsible travel carts or travel dollies when flying with multiple Pelican cases?
Go ahead, Bill.
So I've been through so many carts over the course of my career, and this is a trade-off. And the key word here for me is travel, because the big carts that we all love and work with so much, all the way up from the top of the heat mag liners to rock and rollers and things like that, you just can't travel with them. They're heavier than your luggage, and it's a pain in the tail to try to get something. So years ago, I got a hold of one of these guys. And it has been my go-to travel thing ever since. The Cartabag Super 600, they're not terribly cheap at a couple $100, but it folds up as small as anything I found. And yet it has 150-pound capacity. So if you're doing a stack of Pelican cases or something that's got some heft and you've got some equipment, it's been going for me for the best part of 20 years and it hasn't failed me. So I like those.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to say hi to Charles. Charles, we haven't spoken in several years, and Alex is going to tell you about the best cart in the world.
The best cart in the world is this is the one that I use. So this is a pretty typical rack for what we used to do when we were going out. So this is like what we would check, what I would check. I checked this by myself. So anyway, I think maybe I had one other. Oh, the three of us, I guess, we're checking this in. So these are Cartmaster 500s. These are almost indestructible. They are $1,000. This is not. You didn't ask what the cheapest one is. You said what we recommend. They will handle any amount of cases. You just get into how much you can balance on them. They fold up into almost nothing, and we do check them. They're just checked bags, and they're like 40 pounds or something like that. So they are a checked bag, but they're under 50 pounds. They are, I mean, you know, the biggest thing is just practice opening them before you go to the airport, or you'll look like a fool. They're complicated to open. Like they're not complicated once you get good at it, and you look super cool when you can open them really fast. But the first couple times is really rough. So I did it once in the airport and looked horrible, and then I practiced for like an hour at the office just to make sure that I didn't look like an idiot again. Anyway, the lips fold open. Let me see if I can have another. This is what they look like when they're not. So this is they slide out. They'll be you can either use them as a dolly like this, or you can use them, or you can roll them down. These act as a kind of a controller as well. I mean, they protect the front wheels, and this flips out. So this will flip out and up. This may not, and this one will swing. This piece will actually swing up, I think. So anyway, so the Cartmaster. I mean, and I will admit when Marty Brennis, told me about them, I was like, this is way too expensive. Like, we are not going to buy a bunch of these. We had a bunch of rock and rollers, and we were just constantly destroying them. You know, like, because look at how many cases we were using. So we were just constantly, these rock and rollers were dying. Marty was like, we should just get a Cartmaster. We got one, and then we had 6. Like, I was like, I'm never going to the airport with that one again. So that's the one that I would recommend wholeheartedly. And I miss that I don't have them anymore. All right.
Note that's the same company. It's just the big brother.
Is it the same company?
Have a budget. Yeah, Cartabag. It's the same Remen Cartabag.
Okay,
Makes yours and mine.
Okay, great. Yeah. So just that one's the really big brother.
You got the serious one.
It is the best. Anyway, all right, next question.
Next question. We're moving on to Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. And Scott says, what does the panel think of BirdDog TV Cloud as a solution for remote production of a large classroom with a 3-camera shoot and audio? Any better recommendations?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we tested BirdDog Cloud when it first came out pretty extensively. Jim, who lives in Michigan, has a studio with a couple of these, and he uses it every day. And it is expensive. It's about $150 a month, and so it adds up. Now, when NDI 5 came out, they introduced Bridge, which at first, when they released it, it was in beta still, and now it's looking like it's pretty solid. So before you jump into BirdDog Cloud, and for those of you that don't know what it is, it allows you to have remote NDI sources pop up on your network. So, but NDI Bridge now does the same thing, and it's surprisingly good. So I would recommend taking a look at it. It's basically like routing. So you're basically saying take this source and move it to this destination, and so you can do it very securely. So this is actually it's SRT is essentially what's going on, and I'm not sure what BirdDog Cloud uses. But there is a trial version that you can try out. So if you want to just test it and see how good it works, because it's shocking when you can, take your joystick and control your Xbox controller, and you can control a PTZ camera at the far end, and it feels like you're there. I mean, it's very cool. So it's solid and it works, as opposed to NDI 5. Still not positive of how solid it is. So if you need something right away and you want to make sure it works, go ahead and go with the BirdDog. But I'd also test NDI 5 just because then it's free.
Next question.
Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland's up next with, due to recently introduced COVID travel restrictions, I've been asked to help record a family funeral on Friday with a selection of iPhones running Filmic Pro. What audio and video settings would you recommend?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'll let others cover the audio and video. I just wanted to mention a couple of the logistics. If the phones are going to be in locked off positions, try and get a fixed power supply to them, so you're not running on battery. Either way, check the your runtime for storage and power, and if they're going to be roaming, just make sure they've got fully charged batteries, and try and test that runtime too, actually recording, because that'll affect your battery life.
All right, Roscoe.
Check your upload speeds. I'd look at 10 megabits per second minimum, and then because you're hopefully only going to use half of that, I'd run at 24 frames per second. And then 48K on your audio. You can slide go up to 2997 if you're going through an ATEM and all that. But if you stay at 24, you're just putting a little less load on that system.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, it sounds like you're recording this for doing things in post-production. So I'd also make sure, to Rupert and Roscoe's point, shoot at the lowest frame rate possible, shoot at 1080 so that you, or maybe even 720. I think Filmic can do that. And also get it on a tripod if you can, because wiggle cam is hard, or at least for a couple of them, get on tripods. And assign your shots so that maybe you want the family members that will only be seen this one time. So make sure to get the family members as well.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to support some of what Sky just said, which is ask your editor, if you're going to be editing the footage, ask them what they're capable of bringing in, so you're not shooting in HDR at 4K and find out that the person who's going to be responsible for turning it into an actual program can't handle that.
Next question.
Next question comes up from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, and he says, how would the Office Hours crew approach doing an outdoor show, maybe something based on gardening or permaculture, as opposed to the indoor cooking show?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I'd look for shade would be my first thing. Buying an 8-foot scrim is out of most people's budgets, or just renting them. So I'd look for shade in a garden, because competing with the sun is tough, and you'll look better anytime anyone's in the shade. Secondarily, I'd have a mobile camera, and I'd have someone actively walking around with the camera so that they could step to the right, step to the left, because gardening, you're going to move a lot, and so you're going to block a lot of your camera shots. So if you don't have a good somebody fast on their feet that can get those new shots for you, you may find the show to be somewhat boring. The other thing would be to do it like a cooking show, where you turn them around, put a board in front of them, and just have them pot plants in front of people. That would simplify it and make it a lot easier.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, having spent a lot of my career in Phoenix, Arizona, the sun is everything. And I ran into so many circumstances outdoors where the range of contrast, if you don't have people positioned well, an overhead sun directly in their face or something can really make shots difficult to make look good. So if you have any kind of control and can put any kind of shade or scrim over them, or if you can find something under trees where the light's more consistent, you'll get a lot better results without having to bring in a lot of grip gear and kind of build a set around them.
Go ahead, Rupert.
And also, just watch out for your equipment overheating in the direct sun, so you may need to get some shade or additional equipment for that.
Next question.
Aaron Huslidge of Durham, North Carolina is up next. How do you spice up a show with two talking heads?
Go, Jason.
Hosting is its own thing, and a good professional host can host independently of the topic. If your two talking heads don't necessarily make for interesting conversation with each other, I would try to add somebody who is good at hosting independently of the topic directly into the mix.
Go ahead, Ari.
Aaron, I'm not quite sure what you mean by spice it up, but my take on it is interactivity. Interactivity is very good. Interactivity and also diversity of opinions, etc. So I would look to incorporate viewer comments, possibly call in viewers if that's an option, and also incorporate things like polls, and even maybe a little debate meter where, again, if it's relevant, the two talking heads are talking about a particular subject, and the viewers are dialing in, sending in messages, whatever, and you have the two meters going up and down, and the debate's raging, and the interest is there, and the eyeballs are on the screen, and they're all engaged. So that might be interesting, and spice it up a bit.
Go ahead, Sky.
I really second vote up Ari's comment about interaction and the tools that he gave you that were perfect, because it's engagement, interaction. And again, if it's not entertaining, is it at least interesting? And the other quote I'm going to throw down is, just because you can doesn't mean you should, because you can overproduce something with graphics and sizzle and music and things, and then you have no idea what the content was about, and people will get bored after about the third, big sizzle thing that happens, graphic.
Go ahead, Tony.
As a student of the Alex Lindsay School of Hosting, I wanted to say that one of the things that you want to be concerned with is, what is it that your audience is getting from the conversation? They are the most important people in the room. They are more important than you. They're more important than the guests. Getting to what it is that's going to be valuable and interesting to them, pushing the conversation forward.
Yeah, and I would say the easiest way to do that is through interactivity, answering people's questions. We have this idea that we know what people, and if you're really, really good at it, you might know more about what people want to hear than what they think that they want to hear. We have to remember that when we watch a 60 Minutes interview, they're basically cherry picking out of a very long interview that gets cut down into something that becomes more compelling, because most of it was probably not as compelling. Same thing the same thing with Fresh Air, same thing with Charlie Rose, same thing. Like, all of those things are being edited down. They're not live. So we have to I think that we oftentimes have to talk to our clients about this, because they'll see something that they think was live because it just felt that way. It was edited well that way, but they forget that a lot of the air was cut out of it. And so that they always look their best, because a lot of the stuff that didn't work isn't there anymore. So you have to remember that. I think that the best way to know what the audience wants is to hear them out. And that's what we're doing every day. And what we see, whether it's using our product or somebody else's, is that when you start opening up questions, the average view time generally is multiplied by 10 just with questions. Like, just take those questions and your average view time goes through the roof. If you're actually taking questions from the audience, it's a pretty predictable math for us. And so it's just because people now are paying attention, and there's a lottery principle there, which is that if they ask a question, they're waiting to see if their question gets answered. so there's a whole other piece to that puzzle. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, Meta, that thing that Facebook used to be and is now its parent or something, mentioned opportunities for remote workers to connect during in-person collaboration sessions and events. If virtual events are done right, see Office Hours, Belfast Method, and Conversations with Tony Mobley, couldn't you collaborate productively within a virtual framework?
Go ahead, Bill.
Obviously, you can. It is quite possible. It is not easy. And I was thinking when I read this question first about my experiences in trying to help the people with the music videos we've done for the Office Hours band. It's just a different thing. When you're talking to somebody through a remote connection and you're trying to help them tune up their lighting or their camera work or something, it takes, in my experience, about twice the effort to get the results as, let me just walk over to the light and show you how I want you to wrap it in foil to get it off of the background. Explaining all of that can certainly be done, but there are some jobs that can be done perfectly in the virtual space. There are others that you do miss that I'm in the same space and I can help you quicker get to something, particularly in terms of physical equipment placement and operation. So, they're both great.
We did some training with Google Glass years ago, just as a test, where we had two F3s, two Sony F3s that were about 8,000 miles apart. And we were showing someone how to use the camera. The key was both setups have to be the same. So you can do that physical over the shoulder thing with somebody else somewhere else, as long as they can see your point of view and what you're trying to do, and they have the same thing. In fact, I will argue that it actually is more effective because they have to do it. The one thing that I've learned very quickly is do everything you can, as a teacher, not to touch the thing. Let the students do the thing and have to work through them. It's very painful, but it is very, very, very effective for them to learn it. And that virtual back and forth through that system was super successful for what we were doing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Breakout rooms are great for breaking into smaller groups or making smaller, but that informality of just two people walking to the side and talking about something, working on a problem, that kind of stuff, I see that tremendously beneficial in any kind of work. So that's why I'd say there's some great things to in-person that you just will never accomplish in virtual.
Go ahead, Ari.
I'm second guessing my hand raised a bit, but I will explain. When I read the latter part of the question about couldn't you collaborate productively within a virtual framework, I was taken back just a little bit, and I was saying, hey, you know, I've been doing this for a very, very long time, at least in the tech industry. When I set up a development center in India more than 20 years ago, we were collaborating with R&D in Israel, with customer base in the US, etc. And it was virtual, and we didn't have Blackmagic 6Ks, and we didn't have Zoom at the time, and we didn't have many, many things. But the idea of distributed collaborative work is not new. So purely to the point of, is it possible to collaborate in a virtual framework? Yes, of course, and increase so with these tools. But I mean, it's like, whoa, you know, this idea is not new. So again, I don't know if that was the intention, but that was my take on it.
And I also think that a lot of it just has to do with what tools you deploy on both ends, you know, of what makes it work, which is what Meta's talking about. But I think oftentimes their view of it is much more complex than it has to be. Next question.
Sorry, I'll just also add that at the basis of everything is communication and interpersonal relations. And irrespective of medium, that's always the key. And if you got that right, you can do anything.
And go ahead, Guy.
Yesterday, I saw this very intriguing piece here. Let me pull it up so you guys can see it. It's called a portal, not by Facebook. This is a different portal where it's like a hologram that beams from one location to another. Oops, sorry about the dog there. But you get the idea is you can be in one place and it beams your video to another place in 4K. So I think in the future, we're going to see more of this kind of thing where you're beaming people to other locations and it looks like they're there.
The hard part for that, I mean, so we've done some of that with a variety of tools where we've done full screen, transport people from all over to make that work. And the problem is that it's so hard to do the one full screen one that we don't add more cameras. And what we found is that if you want to teach someone something, what you need is multiple views and ways to interact with the content that you're showing them. And that turned out to be more useful to us than being able to see them it was more impressive to have them at full size talking to somebody, but it was more useful to have, more gear where you could get close-ups and show people things. In fact, there was definitely things that we did that we were like, we could never do this in person. Like I could never do a class for 60 people on how to do this, where I'm showing them close-ups and everything else without a camera system. So I think that when we get good at it and building those tools, it gets a lot easier actually. Go ahead, Rupert.
And like Ari said, a lot of these concepts of distributed work is not new. There's been research and studies all on that subject for a long time. But if you look at some of those older studies, it's a lot of them say there's lots of potential, but the technology's not there yet. Well, we're here now, and we've got a lot more technology. So some of those concepts are clearly going to change.
Yeah, and turnkey technologies are not there, but you can bespoke it relatively effectively. Next question.
Next one made me laugh. Scott Mueller in Germantown said, how do us geezers keep up with the young whippersnappers on all the tech innovation happening? My attention is pulled in 50 directions of all the things I want to watch and learn. I don't absorb tech manuals like I used to back in the day.
I think you need to read that one properly because it needs to sound like, how do these geezers keep up with the young whippersnappers?
Sorry, I'll do it that way.
Oh, these whippersnappers are all running so fast. All right, Ari.
You're assuming that I can speak straight after that performance. Okay. Well, I won't comment on the.
I'm out of breath just watching it. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
I won't comment on the age reference, at least for myself personally, but all here are young at heart. I will say that. But I will reference the latter part, which is as a person who is extremely distracted. I mean, I'm sure I have some type of AD something, whatever. I find it very, very difficult. It goes with like a 50,000 mile an hour brain. What I do is I make lists. I have two primary lists. I have a learn list and I have a buy list, and they go together. I constantly revise them and reorder things based on needs, priorities, and my time constraints. And I just keep it's like a bucket list of continuous learning and doing. Mm-hmm. So that's how I manage that.
You go, Rupert.
In terms of old geezers and whippersnappers. I'm not sure in which category I fall, but I think it's I think it's a you know, a balance. You know, more experience you have, and you know, maybe the more senior or tenure you have, it's what some of what you bring to the table is hopefully wisdom. So, and some of that will tell you that, you know, a lot of technology, some of the technologies that emerge, some will come and go. You know, so you need to be aware of that, and depending on who your clients are, who you're working for, you know, they will be relying on you to have some wisdom in that area to select, you know, that select those appropriately, and your way of learning actually may change over the years, and so actually might the quality of the documentation or the ways in which you can learn, like, you know, office hours and things like that. So it's about staying aware of the market and your learning habits.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Geezers, huh? Anyhow, I absorb information like a sponge. I still do. When I was a kid, I used to read my Allied Lafayette catalogs, and I didn't know what half the stuff in there was, but it just seemed interesting to me. And the only thing that's changed in my 67 years has been how I focus on the things that I want to look at or become more interested in. If I see something that I'm interested in, I'm all in. I will go anywhere, look at anything in order to get more information, in order to understand. And of course, this is a great place to do it, but it's just more of a focus thing that I think maturity brings with the story. And it's not true that people that are suffering from OLD wear scarves.
Go ahead, Sky.
Really, Mitchell? Okay. And that's Mr. Geezer to you. But the information has always been out there. What the change is we now have access to it much easier and at our fingertips. And so consequently for me, to Mitchell's point, I've actually used the lack of energy of youth. I've turned the guile of age and wisdom. And that's served me well. But I think my delineation was working backwards from the need, because yes, I'm just as, able to look at the shiny thing and have to run towards it. But again, that's where I was in marketing, and I understood that marketers are there to sell stuff to me that I may not need. And after throwing the third item away that I didn't need, but I had to have, I've started to really listen harder into what is the need. And now let's solve that problem with the right equipment at that right moment.
Good, Michael.
Stay curious and stay a lifelong learner. I bookmark about 20 websites that I go to in the morning, and just really absorb what's going on. But I really like just a wide variety of science, physics, history, space, electronics, technology, and I just kind of get an overview of everything that's happening, and go to the websites. And thank goodness for the internet, has allowed me to become a lifelong learner.
For me, I need to learn project-based. I won't learn anything until I need it. So I have a thing. I need lots of things. I have to do things every day. So what drives me forward though is I need to actually execute something and get it done, as opposed to I theoretically will follow things, but needing to get something done is usually the thing that gets me to learn how to do it. I find that adrenaline is an incredibly powerful drug at any age, to learn how to do things. So I think that's my big focus. The other thing I do is I try to make sure I surround myself with curious people that know more than I do about some subject, which office hours has turned out to be very effective. So I feel like, at any point in time, if I'm curious about something or I have a question, I have an awful lot of people to ask. And I think that that's one of the real keys, is not so much how to read manuals better, but how to build a better network of people that can answer your questions, because people answering your questions is 100 times more effective than a manual. Next question.
Joe Andrews in Lebanon, Oregon says, would rubber horse stall mats work for flooring in a studio? More rugged than exercise mats, but would they absorb sound well?
Go ahead, Mitchell. I can't hear you, Mitchell, but your sync, amazing.
Pardon me. They would if you have footsteps as a problem with sound in the room, particularly from horses. But I think you're spending an awful lot of money on something that would be best served by wall treatments and ceiling treatments.
Go ahead, Jason.
My immediate thought was, wow, horses have it really good now, because when I was mucking out horse stalls, I don't ever remember rubber horse stall mats. But long story short, I would say the harder a substance is, the more reflective it becomes for sound. And in this case, if it's as hard as I think it is, I don't think it would be a great deadener.
Yeah, I mean, we've used some harder ones. I'm probably going to use something a little bit harder. It's mostly to protect the floor, but it will absorb a little bit. But the best thing is carpet. Carpet does, the thicker the carpet you're willing to roll over, the better from a sound absorption on the ground. Next question.
Richard Lavery's up next from Belfast in the UK. Did the panel see LiveU's announcement of AirControl this week, and what do they think of it?
It looks impressive. I'm already talking to them about when they're going to come on and talk to us about it. So I've already been started trading. We're trying to find the time for them to show up. So I got a little behind it. I knew they were doing an announcement. I didn't know what it was, and I got behind on trying to schedule them. Otherwise, we'd be talking about it today. So anyway, so we're going to try to get them on in the next couple of weeks. That's the big plan. So next question.
Longtime questioner A. Mitchells is in next from Washington with what are the panel's suggestions on the perfect $15,000 US dollars studio for streaming and recording for a school that students will operate and teachers will create content upon?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think staying in the same ecosystem, for example, Blackmagic, get Blackmagic cameras, get Blackmagic ATEM Mini Extreme, stay within their, they have something that covers everything from studio to mirrorless cameras. That way, it's a lot easier because once you understand one part of it, you understand pretty much all of the ecosystem, as opposed to the TriCaster route. I used to be TriCaster, but now I think Blackmagic's covered it.
Sky.
The part that makes me most excited is the last sentence of this part of this question, because it's to what I was just saying, is it's working backwards from the need. And while we're going to be talking about a $5,000 studio, it may be to the whim of whatever is the shiniest thing or somebody's impressed that we were impressed by. And so working backwards from the teachers, the students, and what is their ability, what is their strength. And again, the hardware is only 20% of the expense. The knowledge of how to use it is the 80% that you really should be thinking about.
Go to Roscoe.
Cameras will change, technology will change, but having good comm skills is a lifelong lesson. So I would make sure you put in a really good comm system that the students can benefit from.
And we did talk about a $20,000 one, which is probably close to the $15,000 that you're looking for last week. So last Wednesday, you can probably see us discuss through that. I think that I know that for me, I would start with probably 3 6K cameras with 3 Sigma 24-70s and an Extreme, and then I start building up around that. Next question.
Comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in VR, Florida, and he says, can you please recommend a smaller 4 to 6 port portable Ethernet switch suitable for live streaming? Thanks.
Go ahead, Ari.
This is a D-Link DGS 1008A, but and it's a gigabit 8-port switch, but I mainly want to say that in my experience, any decent, even prosumer level one will suffice, and that's what I use if I'm not doing anything NDI heavy that needs a managed network.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So 2 brands that I will use, Netgear is one of them, and they're starting to get rated for any type of video, especially if you're going to do any type of NDI. And then TrendNet is a little bit less expensive. I always go for 8 ports. That way I always have a little bit extra on it. And I always go for something that can do PoE, power over Ethernet, because you never know when all of a sudden you start putting in Raspberry Pis with PoE or cameras that'll have PoE into it. So those are the 2 I do for unmanaged switches. And also keep an eye out for the 2.5 because they're really starting to go down in price and you'll have a little bit better speed.
Go, Rupert.
So if you're out on the road or you're using something even semi-industrially, then I would, as a general rule, stay away from anything that has a plastic housing. Go for something with a metal casing. I do like the Netgear stuff. I found that over the years I've kept more Netgear small switches, than any other brand. Others have come and gone in my inventory. For streaming though, if you're using VLANs, then you may want to get into the managed switch category, in which case you're going up there a little bit in price. And if you're going up to 8 ports, you may want to then look at Ubiquity. They do a very nice metal cased 8-port switch. So it's just where you want to be.
Next question.
Comes to us from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. And Robert says, does anyone on the panel use the Yolobox Pro? And if so, how did you like it?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the original Yolobox, my church got one, and so I wound up streaming for a year with it every Sunday. And at first I was like, why did you guys get this thing? I mean, I didn't love it because of the way that they make you put in your RTMP information. You have to wait for an email, which is totally bizarre and kind of scary. There was a couple times when I was like, oh my God, like, are we going to miss the show because their servers were down? But I wound up not missing a show for every weekend for a year. So the device itself is solid. That I'm talking about the original one. I did get the Pro, and I tried out the Pro, and it's one of the unique devices that you can bring in. That question that people have asked, can you bring a USB-C like a Brio into a show along with HDMI cameras? So it does that really well, where you can take in a computer, a camera, a Brio, a drone, whatever you want, and then output a stream. So the newer one has a more powerful chip. So that's one of the bigger differences, is that the old one, it was enabled to do variable bitrate encodes, which was kind of lame. When you would get a lot of high motion, it would break apart. So the newer one has, it's just more powerful. So Aaron Parecki has a bunch of good videos if you want to do some research, but they're stable, they work, they're simple touchscreen, switching between multiple devices and adding graphics. So take a look at Aaron's videos and learn some more.
Next question. Sorry.
Next one, Chris Fenwick is standing up for the lightweight, obsessive, compulsive everywhere. Alex, would you mind dressing that cable on the light behind you? I don't think I can look at it any longer.
I like the unfinished look. That's exactly why it's there. That's why it's there. Just kind of like, oh, it's just sitting back there. That's the whole plan. It's not part of the display. I'm not trying to make it clean. That's the game I'm playing. Driving you crazy, isn't it? Okay, I'll work on it. All right, Roscoe.
I recommend Velcro. Velcro, because this is going to be a light that's going to be portable and moved around. Most people might say gaffer's tape, but I think that leaves too much residue, so Velcro.
I have plenty of all of those things. I did it. I left it there as kind of an unfinished light, like it's just waiting to go somewhere. So there's a whole story behind it, like where it came from.
You could even drape it over that knob. Just drape it over, and
it was a light from the country, and it really had an idea for the big city, but now it's somewhere
its
stuck
origin
behind.
story.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole like
that's too inexpensive for the show. Jewelers have this gold wire, and
exactly.
It's sold by the inch.
Right.
Who has counted the number of circles on that light, though?
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, Jason said that theater will probably come back more quickly than movies with the capabilities of remote production tech like the Belfast Method and ZoomISO, OSC, and so forth. Could you see producers leveraging the unique possibilities of the medium?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for producers and venues to leverage things like this in a kind of remote model. Belfast Method is a great example where, although it's a unique and emerging model right now, things like that have the power to be standardized, and then these venues can buy into a method or a process or a system like that to where they can install that equipment or install those workflows and then bring in producers or operators or techs from a pool or a whole resource, as a service. So I think the power and opportunity is there for all of those parties to take advantage of when it, as it matures.
And Jason, you can answer the question next, but you have to move to the center of the frame.
I moved. Right. Here I am in the center of the frame.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Just to be clear, what I meant, I guess, was that I hope theater comes back because theater doesn't have a choice. Theater's options are that or stop existing, whereas movies have an alternative. The alternative is HBO Max. The alternative is watching them at home. So that's all I wanted to add.
Good. Bill, real quick.
Well, in my experience, theater people are some of the most creative on the planet. And so I think they're going to come up with things in the midst of this, rise to the challenge in ways that we can't even imagine. It'll start out in the little regional experimental theaters, but if history proves anything, some of those things will end up on Broadway in a few years and improve Broadway.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rodrigo in Stockholm, Sweden. And Rodrigo says, how do you fix color settings in Zoom? Is it a LUT or in your cam, or are you using OBS with color correction, or maybe something else?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
It's an all of the above answer because it depends totally on what your video chain is. And so if you have the ability to add a LUT, you certainly could spend the time to make it look as good as possible and putting in that LUT and then adjusting it. And it's an iterative process. I do have control over a Brio that I'm sitting right here. So I have my gain control and I have color control and that kind of stuff. That's a pretty straightforward thing. And then certainly, yeah, using something like OBS or vMix is a wonderful opportunity also.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jams in Sandpoint, Idaho, and Jens says, what cables do you make and which do you buy? What are your preferred connectors and wires?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So I will only make or terminate a cable when I have to, only if I'm forced to. If I have to make a repair on site or I need something very custom, if I can purchase it, I will.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I make a lot of different cables, but the ones I make the most are the XLR cables. It's just one of those things. So I prefer to use the Nutric connectors. In fact, I won't touch anything else. And I also like the quad cable, the Mogami. It seems to work out well. And remember, pin 2 hot.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I agree with Rupert. If I can buy it, then I'm going to buy it. Anything I have to run it through the house or something like that, I'll probably end up having to punch down in some way. A lot of times I'm doing Ethernet or something like a XLR or a speaker cable. And when I use the Ethernet, I get the ends that you can push all the wires all the way through and then clip them off at the end. That way I know that they're going inside of there. And I've moved to Cat 7 cables throughout the house, so I have future-proofed it a little bit.
Go, Jason.
I will not terminate unless I absolutely have to an Ethernet patch cable. All the other ones, sure, give me a soldering iron, no big deal. I despise patch cables.
Roscoe.
SDI cables, you got to get your little tool calibrated exactly properly. And once you do, it's pretty easy and wonderful to do.
We have a motorized SDI stripper that works really well. So it makes making SDIs a lot more fun, in my opinion. So I terminate SDI and XLR are the two that I typically will terminate. I will not terminate Ethernet. Life is too short. So I buy all that from Ethernet and HDMI. I won't do. As far as connectors go, I swear by the rear twist Neutrik connectors. They are the bomb. I mean, from an SDI, they're like life changing from an SDI perspective. And when if you hand me an SDI cable that does not have a Neutrik rear twist on it, I know that either you don't know it exists or you don't really care. like you don't really care about your cables because it's so nice. So there's no reason anyway. That's how I judge everybody around me if they give me something other than the rear twists. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia, our friend here on the panel, says, I am suffering with a free port on my ATEM Mini Pro. Should I leave it empty or put in the MacBook Pro 2012, a Raspberry Pi, an iPad Pro? What other source does he use? Go ahead, Ari.
First of all, I want to say that I envy you tremendously for having a free port on your ATEM. But by all means, put in what you need. What I have done, and I don't have any free ports, is in lieu of a patch panel, I've wired up the ATEM just in the way it's positioned on my disk with about 50 centimeter, what is that, about 2 feet of extension cables. So I have it all within easy access, and I do routinely plug in the Playout B or the iPad to demonstrate something and wire up as needed. So that's what I would do.
Go ahead, Tony.
And I don't know if it makes a difference, but I also have an Ethernet connection that's available for use with whatever device I add. I just wanted to add that.
Roscoe?
Yeah, I'd use either the iPad Pro or the Mac, whichever interface you're familiar with, because your show is pretty much pre-produced. And so you're going to get a lot of more use, in my mind, out of using the Mac if you need to call up something or just want to create a quick graphic or something like that. But also if you have a lot of pre-produced elements, both of those are pretty good playback devices.
Now go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you need one of these things behind me. See that? It moves around, and you have a little joystick, and it's so cool because then you can steer it wherever you want it to go. So you need one of those, Tony. That's next on your list.
Yeah, good, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of times that you take that one camera and then switch to it so you can show everybody what's going on. So something over your shoulder that's a little bit more static so we can see your gear, it might help out a little bit.
Next question.
David Brady in New York City. Next up, are there any other interoperable players like Pepix, P-E-X-I-P, that enable Zoom to connect to various other VC platforms such as Google and Teams?
Go ahead, Rupert.
As a service for two-way audio video handoff, I'm not sure. There's some on-prem ways to plumb it through SIP handoff and things like that. But in general, these when you're looking at these types of services, you will find things out there that do integration for like scheduling and all the meta information back and forth and things like that. But if you're looking for true two-way audio and video, then you need to look for that quite specifically.
When we've had to do that, we generally go out of the hardware into a hardware system and then push it back in again. And we've had connected everything to everything else, including satellite trucks and Vivix and also the switch with Zoom, Hangouts, Teams, everything else. But we used hardware to do that interop. Next question.
Next one comes from Trevor New in Beacon Hill, New York, and he says, have you ever used Synchronous Audio Router for Windows? Is there something similar that you could recommend? I tried Source Nexus, and there was too much latency. Thanks.
I do not know what Synchronous Audio Router is. I'm wondering whether it's something like Unity Connect. It is. It's like. So this looks like it's loopback. Like that's when I look at it, it looks like it's loopback for Windows. I don't know of anything on the Windows side. I think you might have stumped us on that one. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jen's in Sandpoint, Idaho again. And Jen says, has anyone had their AirPod Pros start making a clicking noise if the transparency or noise cancellation modes are on?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, it shouldn't be happening, and if it is, it's because your microphones are blocked, and it's giving you a little bit of fold back, and it's trying to cancel that, and that's where the clicking's coming from.
Next question.
Next one, and I'm not sure if you're controlling him now or not, or if I should move more over, but Albie in San Antonio is asking what wireless HDMI transmitter recommended for an 8-hour event. Just thinking of an alternative to wired HDMI.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
A Terranax or a Hollyland. Let's see. I think it's a Mars. They're pretty inexpensive, around $800.
Go ahead, Rupert.
It just depends on really what you're working with, what resolution you may be working with, whether it's 1080 or 4K, the distance involved, and really the type of environment you're in. If it's going to be really RF noisy and you've got other stuff around you, if you're in the middle of the desert, you may be able to get away with something different to, if you're on site in a crowded location.
Good guy.
Dun, 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 dun. The new, I forgot my little shiny sound effect. I could have queued that up too. This is the Hollyland C1. It just started shipping. And what's unique about this one is it's 1,000-foot HDMI and SDI, but it'll also go UVC USB in. So you don't need a capture card. You just plug it right into your device. And so you can hook it into Zoom, and that's your cameras, and you could be 1,000 feet away. It's pretty crazy.
And does it have a DTAP charge? Will it take DTAP?
I haven't opened it yet, but typically what you get is it's just a 12-volt and to D-tap cable. I don't know if it's in the box, so I can let you know in a second. I'll tear into this.
Yeah, there you go. No, I was just curious. It's one thing that we've used for long events. We get these large camera external batteries that we find a way to charge these things with, because although on their own they'll last a couple hours, but they won't last 8 hours. But you can get these external batteries, and if you get them on at the beginning, they don't use their own battery. So if they're fully charged, you can easily swap battery to battery without them losing a signal. So at least with I'm more familiar with the Terradex than I am with the Hollylands. So I'd actually like to play with those. I just haven't ever. We've done a couple little tests with them, and they seem to work fine, but we've never actually used them in a production. We usually go Teradek or above for what we're doing. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, Alex, you mentioned the large bandwidth reduction when Facebook changed the video codec.
Yeah, I can't talk about that one. Like I'm sorry,
okay.
I tried to kick that back and it somehow came back up again. And that's my fault. That's my fault for bringing it forward.
No problem.
Let's go to the next question.
Okay, it comes from Douglas Carmichael. What would you think of a second hour on Audiomovers? And he's got a link there, which transport live audio over the internet. Richard and I are planning to test it for the next Belfast show.
Didn't we bring those folks in already? Maybe it was a different one. I thought we had brought Audiomovers in. But if not, we should find a date for them sometime. Right now. I've now scheduled out, so I have to think about what we do. But we can still move the schedule around. But I've a schedule for like 2 months now. So, but let's reach out to them if we haven't. I'd love to have them on. Yep. Next question.
The last one here in the queue, Douglas Carmichael asks, in an article about Dunkirk, the movie, it mentioned Christopher Nolan wanting to have an entirely photochemical workflow. What steps would you need to take to mitigate the environmental issues created from the use of said hazardous chemicals in production?
Have directors stop losing their mind over something that is past oriented. So I mean, we're done. Like, film is over. Like it's like in this weird state. It's going to reach a point where it doesn't have enough critical mass to print the film anymore. So like, there's I know that some filmmakers are really attached to that, are really attached to their film, but it's not going to happen. Like, I know that means Quentin Tarantino is not going to make any movies, according to him. He's done, which we'll have to live with. But I think that this, I guess I just, every time I see some filmmaker talking about wanting to work in film, I just kind of roll my eyes. I mean, and I started in film. It's so ugly. Like, it's just not the chemicals. It's just so slow. Like and laborious, and you lose everything about production. You don't finish anything in production. You run out of time. So everything.
It's expensive.
Well,
good Lord, is it expensive?
It's not, in the grand scheme of things, and when you're building sets and doing other things and everything else, it's not that expensive. Like, the film and the cameras are not that expensive. It's that it slows down your entire process, and some filmmakers like that, but it's not the future. Like, it's not going to last. Like it's like you're hanging on to something, that you're hanging on to a piece of a wall that is coming off the wall. Like, it's not going to stay there. And it's just like, I just feel like and they can grapple with it for as long as they want. And maybe their upsets will give it another couple of years, but it's going to be an art form like SX Polaroids or something within the next decade. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, I understand the nostalgia of it, but there have been various times in my career when I've had to say, even though I have mastered this technology is going away. And you can either hold on to the old, and I've seen colleagues and friends of mine do that. This is how we do audio, and you still need to work in OMF and things like that. And you're going, oh, and you have to make or break. Either you're going to move forward and play the game the way it's played now, or you're going to hold on to the traditions of it. And it's an important thing to decide whether you're going to be of the forward moving crowd or of the backwards looking crowd. And with the pace of change now, I think you got to look forward, because it's just, there's so many new capabilities that are so much more affordable and so much more powerful, that looking back is a losing game in the long run.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
The Smithsonian goes back and redigitizes their film every 3 or 4 years because the technology changes. And I'd question, will there be a DV tape layer in the next 30 years? So digital formats are not as easy to take into a long-term archiving format. So film still has its uses. As an acquisition format, I'd just say go visit Rochester, New York, look around and see the devastated landscape.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, again, we can, we're probably maybe 2 or 3 years from the time. So I guess what I've heard is that IMAX is about a 17K image, 18K image. We're probably 2 or 3 years from cameras coming out that are at that resolution. And then at that point, it really becomes complex, to say, why would you do that? Especially as we keep on getting more and more exposure depth. I think we're within 5 years of a 20K sensor that's 20 stops of light, and at that point, it just isn't going to make any sense to do film. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I will say that if you decide to stick with the old ways, then you should quadruple down and just buy everything that you can and have everything ready to fix if you need, because there can be some money that's made if somebody decides, hey, we want to go a little, if they want to go retro, then they'll come to you, and then you can charge them an arm and a leg to get do whatever they want done. So there is some money to be made in it, but it's kind of not worth it either. So.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas has the opening of our new top of the hour discussion, since it's after. You want to prep us, Alex? I think we're out of questions.
I do that on purpose. I wait for a second.
Oh, sorry.
What I'm trying to do, by the way, when people see me do that, is I'm creating edit points so that if we ever want to come back and just cut the second hour, there's always like a couple seconds of dead time. So you always see me stop at the top of the hour, and then I'll go into it, and that's just so that, because I've had to cut those many times in the middle of a breath or when someone was rolling on into one thing. So I always stop for a second and then I start up again. I don't know if we'll ever do it with the older ones, but I've been doing it for the last 6 months. So we're changing subjects, and we're now jumping into our second hour, and we're going to be talking about studios at $5,000 or less. So for our panelists, go ahead and raise your hand in the opening discussion question. That way, if you want to say anything as we get started, we can kind of talk through those things. But the idea really is, last week we did one for 20,000, and some people said that was a little rich for what they were working on, and so we decided to do something different, which is at 5,000, which I think is a very reasonable amount of money to do it. We could probably do the same thing in a week or two with 500 or 1,000, just so we had different scales of these things. So let's go ahead and jump into the discussion. Go ahead, Ari.
So I think one of the important questions is really to ask, what is this studio going to do? And you may not know in the beginning, but it makes a difference whether you're going to do virtual live production, whether you're going to be going on site, whether you're going to be bringing people into the studio to either have an on-air segment or record videos or whatnot. And based on that, you will need to tool up. The caveat in that is that in the learning process, at least for me, and I've bought a whole bunch of equipment that I don't regularly use, but I've learned a lot. So if you can spec out what you're going to do, then that's what I would aim for. You will be prepared to spend a certain amount of money on the learning process, but it will be worthwhile later on.
Yeah. And the one thing to be careful of, and we'll get it, is also not overextending yourself, as far as be conscious of what you can actually get done inside of $5,000, as opposed to, I want to fit the biggest mistake people make with production is, I want to fit a $20,000 solution into a $5,000 box. And that is the thing that really you just end up with a bunch of stuff that doesn't really work. So you're better off doing things that do really well and provide the foundation for you to keep growing from there. So if you decide you got another 3,000 or another 2,000, you can keep going from there. Go ahead, John.
So this studio was designed by committee in after hours yesterday. We all did our homework together, and we went through several different iterations, and then Chris edited it for accuracy and proofreading. We got two of the Canon M50s, the one that Courtney uses. We've got an Avaya for a rear cam or a wide shot, Heil PR40, Linsol earphones and ears, Behringer Flow 8, the newer kit, which is 2 lights and stands, Mac Mini, the baby Mac Mini, 2 4K Dells, ATEM Mini Pro. We had an ISO in there, but we took it out because we went over budget, and then associated cables and computer mounts, etc.
It's good. Go ahead. The thing that I would question is whether we need, if someone said me for $5,000, I wouldn't have multiple cameras. Like for me, I would go to one camera, and I would get, from the problem that I have with as a $5,000 kit, my thing is that I have to run everything by myself. This isn't something for a crew to run. And so my thing is that makes the Blackmagic cameras even more important to me, because it's little things like focusing. Like, how do you focus when you're by yourself, when the camera's behind a teleprompter or when the camera's behind something else? It becomes like this Tetris, of I got to focus on my chair and then I go sit on it and see if it's in, and everything else. So I guess my little things like that, and exposure and all those other things, not being able to control it from there, I think is the thing that that I would always kind of back into for that process. Go ahead, Jason.
Get out of my head. My focus is ever so slightly off, and I probably doesn't even come through in Zoom, but it's driving me absolutely nuts. I'm trying to get it as it goes. But anyway, one of my thoughts was, for a $5,000 studio, something like this is way too complicated. A softbox is way too complicated. But if you get something like diffusion, any sort of diffusion on the light, it's going to do a lot more for the light.
Large light sources, no matter how you do it, you want to get those sources as big as you can. If you don't have the money to really artfully whatever, big sources is important. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, just as a video novice, I don't know the first thing about video. Could you guys explain, like in one sentence, some of the functions of the equipment that you're choosing? So like, what's a B-Link? I was looking at Jonas's layout of what he has coming up here, and what's a playout B, and just some of the terminology. Give us just a one sentence definition of what the function of this equipment is.
Yeah, do you want to pop that one back up, John, just from yours, just so we'll go through that really quickly. It's a good question. So let's just talk through each piece here. The cameras are, of course, cameras are cameras. The microphone is a microphone. The earphones are in ear. So these are in ear. The audio interface, of course, is the mixer, as well as the interface of bringing the audio in. The lights are the lights. The computer is the computer. The monitor is a monitor. Video switcher, of course, is switching those sources. And I would get a switcher even if I only had one camera, because you want to be able to control. Again, for me, I want to be able to control it. And then, of course, you have camera mount. So I think John's is actually pretty straightforward. I'd have to look at, for what Jonas is talking about, I think that he is talking about a playout B as a Raspberry Pi with his software that will act as a hyperdeck and attach to the switcher. So that's a great add, just because it's a really easy way to add for very little bit of money, $100 for the hardware and the software. You're adding the ability to play out videos. So that's super useful. And then, and I don't have Jonas's up yet, so it's coming up here, but we'll talk through those when we hit Jonas's as well. But I think that, you have to figure out all of those, core pieces, and then just how many of each one. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'm kind of down the Blackmagic realm. I put mine in Mukana, and I also put the Discord. I put the PTF that details out more stuff. But basically, I'm on a Mac Mini, $869, Dell 24-inch monitor, Pocket 4K camera. I went ahead and went with that because even though it's not what we'd love to put in your house, which is a 6K, it's useful. It's useful as a webcam. It's useful just to learn the programming of an ATEM. I went ahead and put an ATEM Mini Pro ISO in there because you'll want that one eventually. You'll probably want the Extreme, but in a 5,000 budget, it's a little bit beyond. And then you're going to need some storage, some Samsung T5s and that kind of stuff. So you can do it. And the way I look at it is, does the equipment last beyond its initial use? Is there something you can use it for down the road?
Go ahead, Chris.
I agree with what you were saying, Alex, about trying to keep it, not trying to be big when you're not big. I think that's a very common mistake that people do, and they don't just admit, I'm not going to do a huge show with this much money. I'd even go so far as to saying, my $5,000 studio would be a $1,000 studio. One camera, a light, a Flow 8, a mic, and a stand, and be done with it.
Yeah, I think that the issue is there's as you're seeing, I think that to some degree is that there's a big step up from the Brio to a 6K as far as the quality goes. So, that starts to put you into a different realm. And that's from a color representation,
Absolutely.
Sharpness, depth of field, all those things. When we're talking about $5,000, you can absolutely get there for that price, and so, and I think that is, the camera makes a big difference, in that piece. Go ahead, Sky.
Keep going back to Brian when he said, a microphone is so that you can get your voice into somebody else's ears. And this is the kind of the rule of thumb. When we were doing our thing early days of COVID, the engineer from Microsoft helped me understand, okay, we're going to give you a right now solution, but we're going to allow you to grow into it and grow out of it. And so you can get to the right solution in the future, because equipment used to be $60,000 for a camera, $30,000 for a lens. And so a lot of this, it's hard for some people to believe that this equipment that we're buying now is almost disposable, but it kind of is. And so that's a different attitude about why you're getting this gear, and how much different things used to cost versus what the solution is that you're getting now for the price.
It's interesting as we start to think about these lists that we do get into you can see what people prioritize, in each one of them, like what's important. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
The next one comes from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. And he says, here is the list of equipment I use for my local church, which almost hits the 5K mark. And he's got a link there.
And I will, let me pull this up here real quick. So here's Jonas's. So he's got the extreme ISO, the G70, the bidirectional to get to the G70, the SDI cables that are needed, a monitor, an X32, which is leaning in heavy. This is why you can see the priority. Jonas understands that he wants to do a lot of audio, a B-Link, Playout B, HDR GFX Pro, the Amazon basic HDMI and rigs. I imagine that's just like random rig. And so this is playing out the B-Link. The only question I would have with the B-Link that the issue with the B-Link is that it will only do 720 when it connects. So if you use a B-Link, you're giving up a 1080p up. That's why we don't use those. Ari?
In reviewing Jonas's list, I forgot for a moment that this was a list for a specific location and job, and I was going to comment about the X32, but you're absolutely right that in that location, audio would be key. I will second very strongly the ATEM Extreme. What was missing for me in the list, and again, I don't know if it's an oversight or whatnot, but a software switcher, whether that's free OBS or vMix, and especially when we're considering budgets, for someone entering the field later on, or maybe early on, I don't know, but there is a discussion to be had about hardware switchers versus software switchers, but you probably want to play around with the software switcher and have it in your toolkit regardless. And I'll just add here that nobody's mentioned a Stream Deck yet. And the Stream Deck, for me, is an essential productivity thing that I think you must have in your kit. And get the 32 keys, please.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I understand you can get them for $100 if you know where to ask. Alex, you mentioned you can see where people's priority are. It's a really good point. I think the other thing to think about is a $5,000 studio may become a $10,000 studio or 20. And there are certain things that you want to hold off and buy once, And so in some regards, like when I was thinking about it, it was like, well, would I get a Flow 8 or would I put all the money into a Mix Pre, even if it's the most expensive thing in the studio? And I'm very much teetering on that because the Mix Pre is better. Not everybody needs it. The Mix Pre is better. Should you just wait and buy that? Should you buy, I hate the fact that I have a pile of audio interfaces I will never use sitting next to me.
Yeah. And I think that the hard part for me is that, so my current kit, or the kit I'm moving into, is a X32 because I need more things. I probably will still have a Mix Pre in my kit because I need the noise assist. I can't operate without it. And so that's the issue is that having that clean audio makes such a big difference for me. And it depends on your environment of what makes a difference there. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm sorry. It was the next question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I jumped questions. Next question.
Jack B in Phoenix, Arizona says, if you were buying a first camera that is not a cell phone or a hobbyist photographer currently shooting on an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you have an ATEM Mini Pro, which camera would you choose next?
Go ahead, Bill.
No, okay. So the ATEM Mini Pro is going to always push you toward Blackmagic because the integration between their cameras and their switchers are phenomenal. You get a great deal of capabilities. But I want to jump back a little bit. There's this thing, all right? When you're shooting,
don't jump back too far because we've got a lot of questions.
Okay.
so
Thanks. I appreciate you keeping. So I'll try to do this really
reel you
quickly.
in. Yeah. Like we got to move a little quicker.
Video cameras have this advantage that still cameras or even rigs on cameras that have large sensors to get that great depth of field that we all love, shallow depth of field, but they do not generally run with parfocal lenses, which keep focus from the tightest to the widest in a zoom that you can control. Everybody I know who learned to shoot video or shoot cinema style, you got used to that process of being able to frame tight and go wide to reveal more, or frame wide and go tight to focus your audience in on a particular thing. And when you move to these rigs with a still camera with a large sensor, unless you put a lot of rigging around that for focus and zoom, you lose that. And I don't think you should lose that. I think you should learn that visual language.
I think that the only thing I'll say is that I would want to future-proof what I bought that I can add on to it, but I would be very careful to not spend more money that is going to not serve me today. You know, like that's I don't know because I haven't used, 99% of the time I use for a lot of the stuff we do right now when we're doing web stuff for the web, you know, we're using photo cameras, like photo lenses. You know, we're not, when we do big jobs, I'm bringing in, basically I either have Canon L series or Sigma, or I switch immediately to, to Cabrillos. There's I don't have any, like nothing exists to me. Nothing like once I decide I'm not going to use the lenses I have sitting in the office, I'm going to rent real lenses, and that immediately goes to $10,000 and $30,000 lenses, and I don't have any in between. And so but we don't kit out our stuff with that. Anyway, Sky.
So to Chris's point of trying to save you the pain of sitting in amongst a bunch of, things that you bought that you'll never use again, I'm going to push it and say Filmic Pro. Learn the theory of camera, learn the understanding of what an ISO is, learn the understanding what a speed ramp is. So start with that. Then I like the Lumix. If you're going to a DSLR, because it's portable, it's the hand. I get the need to hold on to something, and you can swap out the lenses. And then of course, yes, the Blackmagic Pro. And if you want, as Alex said, you want to spend more money, we can do that for you.
All right, next question.
Next one comes up from Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo, California. What are the prerequisites to make a $5,000 studio usable? Internet connection speed, office furniture, window coverings, and so forth.
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, I'll do the internet. I would say you need at least 20 up. That would be 20 megabits or 20 kilobits per second up. And I'll leave Ari with the rest of it.
Go ahead, Ari.
Thank you, Jason. I will again just harp on what I said in the beginning, which is be clear on the purpose for which you're setting up the studio. And again, that might not be clear to you, but that clarity will drive much of your purposes. As much as you can be clear, that would be better. So understand what you intend to do.
I'm just going to adjust the last one, light covering. Don't worry about that. Just go to an art store, buy some thick black foam core, cut it to space, put it in your windows. You'll end up blacking out a room, and you'll have total control of your lighting.
Next question.
Next question comes up from George Butters, and George in Halifax, Nova Scotia says, what about those without a fixed place, but who take the studio on the road? For example, small group in-person, socially distanced events with an all-remote audience that demands a high level of inclusivity and interactivity in the event, like AGMs.
I don't know what AGMs are. Does someone know what that means?
Annual general meetings.
Got it. Okay, Rupert.
Yeah, so whatever your budget is, if you're going to be on the road, it needs to include Pelican cases.
Or, so I will say when I do office hours on the road, I definitely scale down. so I, I don't try to take what I put in my office. I wouldn't try to take a $5,000 kit to it, because I have kind of a rule that in general, I want most of the time I will do absolutely everything I can to fit into a carry-on and a backpack. Like I am just like obsessed with carry-on and backpack of what I'm going to take. And so I hate picking up luggage. Anyway, so for that's why I immediately scale down. Number one is I scale down the clothes I'm going to take, because half of my carry-on is going to be the gear that I use just for office hours. But that's where I shift down to like a Pavo 6C. I usually have 4 of those. I've gotten to the habit now of taking the Aperture 7Cs as to replace the fixtures. Although the last time I went, the fixtures were a different fitting, which is a pain. And then that's where I use the Brio, but I still take a mix pre and a headset mic, because it's just because I'm in a hotel. It's even more important to have noise noise removal than even at home. So, but that's kind of the basic kit, and then some little tripods in my laptop. The biggest thing is I use my carry-on, which is exactly 9 by 14 by 22. Not that I pay a lot of attention to the size of my carry-ons, but I put my laptop on top of that, so it sits right under my camera. And so once I empty it, it becomes the stand, for what I'm doing there. And I lost track of my panel here. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of support what Alex just said, in that the two things that I'm most concerned about, particularly in corporate kind of headshot type work or general meeting stuff, I want them to look good and I want them to sound good. Looking good almost is as important as sounding good in this particular case, because a corporate exec has to lead, and that is everything to do with image and the projection of power. So lighting, you want to be able to go into any office, whether it's in front of the windows, their executive desk, a conference room, and have the tools like the little scissor clips and things like that to hang lighting correctly to make that person look as good as possible. If they pop and you can hear them, your job is done regardless of what camera you're shooting with.
And to Rupert's point, by the way, if I'm driving, which is 99% of the time now, I do take Pelican cases. like they're just like I now have room. I can now Pelican this out. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, there's one other part to this, which of course is Ethernet. Get Ethernet cable. If you can use Ethernet and avoid Wi-Fi, please, 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 please do. It doesn't matter whether or not they understand. What matters is that you understand.
Also, the first thing that I do now is check the speed of my cellular. We've found varying things when I've been in LA, which is that in one hotel, my cellular actually worked better than the hotel. So when I switched to cellular in the next hotel, the hotel was way better than the cellular. I do feel like we almost need to, I thought about this in the before times of having people rate their hotels based on like geekery, as opposed to all the silly stuff that people pay attention to with hotels. It's like, okay, well, is there an Ethernet cable in the room? Does it work? How fast is the Wi-Fi? All those things are the things that are important. Not does it have Wi-Fi, but what is it? What kind? Next question.
Kristen Osterkamp in Germany is up next and says, if people like educators, private persons, young persons want to approach a 5K studio build, what do you suggest as a step-by-step approach?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm actually going to throw it right back at you, Alex, because I'm going to get a tattoo and it's going to have the 4 top things in their priority order. So I'm going to throw it back at you. And what are those 4 things I should get a tattoo about?
And you want to have your internet connection solved first, then you solve your audio, then you solve your lighting, then you solve your camera, and then you solve your background or environment. Like those are we have found after thousands of people that if we do that, that's how you solve the most number of problems for the least amount of money, as you go down that path. Go ahead, Rupert.
Well, I'd written my notes here for this question, and that's exactly what I'd written: internet, audio, lighting.
IALCB. There it is.
Exactly.
It's going to be on your back forever.
There we go. I'm waiting for the tattoo. I wait for after hours. You can let us all watch you put it on.
The smell.
I say go right down your neck, right here. I think that's really what all the cool kids.
But then
do
I'd
now.
have to write it backwards so you can read it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say site survey first, and I would go to after hours, literally take pictures of wherever you're going to put this in, because so much of doing this is solving problems because of where you have to broadcast from. And the group after hours is so good at analyzing your circumstances and saying you might have audio problems because of this. You might have there's a window right in the way that's going to throw in light. What time of the year do you have to do this every day? Is the window going to change? Do you need to block it? There are just so many variables that I think site survey is the #1 place I'd start before anything else.
Next question.
Next question from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. He says, could an employer onboard a new employee for professional at-home work with a 5K budget, or would more be needed?
Go ahead, Ari.
So again, my AD whatever is getting ahead of me. And at first I thought that this is just professional work in, let's say, a corporate environment or a job for which they need to appear remotely. And then I reread it and I said, oh, might this be a case where the professional work means in remote production? So to the first point, you could, do it for 10% or less. I routinely recommend, let's say, a Brio $100 USB mic and a $70 Viltrox LED panel, 2 panels that sit on the desk, and that will, be very sufficient for employees that need to be present online. If the question is about someone who is going to be doing professional at-work home in the remote production environment, then again, it depends what role they're going to play. But I would say within specific roles, yes, definitely. Even within 5K budget, you could do that. But again, depends on the role.
Go ahead, John.
Based upon Alex's comments, based on our 5K studio, may I present to you the 7.7K office hour studio.
Okay.
Because we upgraded to Blackmagic instead of the Canons, which we agree, and then upgraded to a mini extreme ISO, and that's a really good kit for 7 and change.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're willing to stretch just a little bit, you end up with a lot of camera. I mean, a lot of and then you said you have the extreme, and then
upgraded to extreme, and then took out the 2 Canons in replace of one Blackmagic 6K with the Sigma lens.
Yeah, that's so we're stretching our rules, but for conversation, I do think as a very high quality home office, I think that 8K is about the right. I'm doing some math on my end as well, and 8K becomes kind of more of the right number for a lot of this stuff. But 5K can definitely be done. I have been thinking that at 5K, I don't know whether I'd get everything I wanted to, even for a basic one. So I'd probably switch to a Brio. I'd rather have a mix pre 3 with noise assist and the mic than a good camera, because I just want people to be able to hear me and not have background noise. I think the Flow 8's great. That's where it gets to what Bill was saying, is environment becomes really important, of what the environment's going to be. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next with what on a 5K budget, what choices can be made to ensure upgradability later, and what corners should not be backed into?
That's the real issue with, like, if you buy a Brio, you get a camera that looks reasonably good for a lot of things. You just don't have the switcher. You don't have the other things. And again, buying cameras that are non-Blackmagic, if you're going to use a Blackmagic switcher, means eventually those cameras are not going to be something you're using. Like, there's going to be some point where you go, I can't use those cameras. And so, I think that's the only thing that you might use them. They'll get pushed off into something else. And so that's what I would argue is where if you get a 6K, you'll just buy another 6K. Go ahead, Jason.
This is another great example of, wanting to get premier things and then being able to upgrade the chain later. I met Bob Heil maybe 10, 15 years ago, and I bought this Heil PR40 as the result. And this can be used on a Scorpio, on a $10,000 preamp, or it can be used on a Flow 8, which costs, I don't know how much, but not very much.
Right.
That's a great example of buy it once, it's $300, and you get to stay with the exact same thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Probably a Brio probably isn't too much of a corner to back into, because that's going to be useful on the road. But I was thinking, having an ATEM and not a Blackmagic camera is a bigger chunk of change to not necessarily be the most ideal moving forward.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, you mentioned the Pocket 4K camera as the reference for the $5,000 studio. What tripod would you use within the 5K limit to set the camera on the desk?
Go ahead. Oh. yeah, so I wouldn't set it on the desk. I put it on a tripod behind. I know that and Chris, you're on a desk, right? You've attached it to a desk.
Yeah, my desk is starting to look like a porcupine.
Yeah.
It's got literally
Things.
there's a my key light is a Elgato key light, and it's clamped to the desk, and it porcupines up. My fill light is a great little like $20 stand that I have my old key light that had been in the middle. I'm trying to shoot from the side to make the background darker and kick off a little more. Then I have a stand, a Visa mount stand with a clamp that has the camera. So yeah, this thing is
and just tap on your desk. It does pretty well.
Quality IKEA desk.
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah, so I mean that's.
I mean, I could shake it. I could definitely shake it, but
right. That's the thing that we just see over and over and over again is people's desks vibrating their cameras, and which is always that's why we always worry about that. Go ahead, Bill.
Rupert and I are going to do an IKEA seminar where we teach everybody the best stuff to buy at IKEA.
I'll tell you, I just want to say one little story about that is that we had a bunch of stuff that we had to build into we had like 9 days to design and build a set into the corner of a hallway, and it was crazy. And there was no time. We built some of the stuff custom, but we had to just use some IKEA stuff. And we had two model makers from ILM that came in to help us build the set. They went to IKEA, and watching them customize an IKEA thing, like, oh, we just need a little shorter. They just made it 3 inches shorter, and they just you could see they just looked at it, and then you saw they pull out a saw and just cut everything short, and then put everything together. And they did it as fast as I can build the IKEA thing. And I was like, oh, like if I was like, they should just do a TV show on how to put together IKEA.
I will say, I recently bought a dresser for my niece. They're having a baby, and it's like IKEA 3.0 or something.
Yep.
And this is a dresser that had 6 drawers in it, not a single fastener in the whole thing. It literally snapped together.
Wow, that's interesting.
Kind of frightening, actually.
Yeah, I kind of figured it out finally after all these years, Bill.
My biggest challenge in getting my rig set up here was finding the right tripod to put under the Blackmagic 6K, because I'm on a tiered desk. I have an old Middle Atlantic big production desk, and of the first 3 that I bought, none of them would go low enough and arrange better. And I was seriously thinking I was going to have to build a rail and do some kind of a weird tripod thing. I finally found on one offshore a small tripod that could get low enough to get the camera at the right geometry. So it's no small task when you were building in these things, because I don't think tripod manufacturers thought there were going to be millions of people sitting at desks trying to do this. And I find there's kind of gaps between a lot of mini tripods are either too high or too low for us, so just right. And I think this is going to be complex. I wish somebody was making more tripods and more specifications for that.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we had this problem, so we developed one for the ring lights that is super stout. So it can, using the center column, go up and down, and then it's got a standard ball head, but it's meant to carry a beefy lens with a beefy camera, and then it can still hold a full-on ring light. So those are on sale right now.
That's right.
40% off. So
cool.
Grab one.
Very cool. Very cool. Next question.
Next question comes up from Rupert McRae at Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, what paid software might be needed within a 5K studio when purchased or subscription?
Go ahead, Ari.
Should I say it depends? It does, but I will say 2 things. First of all, mix effect, hands down, some of the best money you will ever spend, and not that much. And ZoomISO and ZoomOSC. ZoomOSC comes under the subscription model. ZoomISO is one time. You will need the ATEM Extreme, but combined with, by the way, Companion, which is free, and the Stream Deck, which I recommended, 32 keys. That is a lot of power. So mix effect and ZoomISO if you're doing that type of work.
Go ahead, John.
Based upon Alex's latest comments, may I present to you The 8.5 office hours studio.
Expensive friend. Yeah.
Does this define scope creep?
We've upgraded.
Yeah, this is scope. This is the ultimate scope.
We
creep.
upgraded the audio interface to the MX3 2 with audio with noise assist.
And that is I will say that is a screaming screaming kit. So we haven't gotten to the $5,000 one, but we've got a really good $8,500 one. All right, go ahead, Sky.
I'm sorry, I'm still chuckling about that. The sneaky subversive things are the subscriptions that you forget about. For instance, yes, I have the pro version of Zoom. That's a cost. I've got Adobe. That's a cost. Now, for teachers, there are advantages there. Maybe there are associations that you're a part of that buy things like that for you, for your, for you to use. But these are these sneaky little things that, oh yeah, somebody else used to pay for that. Now I have to. That's those subscriptions are a good point to. So Zoom, Adobe.
All right, go ahead, Rupert.
Just in terms of scope creep, you can look at it that way, or maybe classic sales upselling.
Yeah, exactly. But we
upsell ourselves. That's the funny part. There's no salesman here.
Yeah, I would say that probably in a $5,000 one, I'm not sure. I mean, Mix Effect Pro would be the one thing if you have an extreme, but I think that that and Playout B. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything you need. You can probably do most of what you need to do on most days without anything else. The next step up from there would probably, for me, be like Affinity Photo, so that I can, make graphics, for it. But that's like $40 or something like that. But outside of that, I don't know. I was trying to think through things that I feel like I would absolutely need for doing what I'm doing. And even though graphics, you could do 90%, 95%. If you have a Mac, you could do 90 to 95% of the graphics you need on Keynote. I often do that. And I have clients that send me, this is the opening slide, the Keynote slide. Like they just put it together in Keynote and send it to me. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. He says, would the Huddle Cam be the best monitored top HDMI camera that fits within the 5K limit?
Go ahead, Rupert.
For something that's like literally native HDMI that will literally sit on the top of your monitor, it probably is, but I think I'd find some way of mounting an iPhone up there and getting a Filmic Pro with HDMI out.
I will say that if you have an iPhone laying around, everything from about the iPhone 8 and above with Filmic Pro looks better than every webcam out there. like it's just, and as you get better iPhones, they just look better and better and better. So buying like a used iPhone 10 or 11 and using Filmic Pro is probably, I mean, if I was going to, I think that they, especially when I look at what Tony's doing with his, you're just like, wow, that looks really good. So it's if you have an old one, it's a great way to use it. And if you have a new one and you're willing to pop it in and out, that's fine. But like, for instance, with the cooking ones, I've gotten to the point where I use a 6K for my main camera, and I'm using iPhones, not because I don't have other 6Ks, but because they're just easier to mount. They're easier to put where I want them to be. And I don't need the short depth of field. I actually need more depth of field for what they're being used for. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and you brought up the used market, and I think that's a viable beginner's way to get into a category of a thing.
You have to be careful with it. I mean,
of course you do.
I'm always like, I wouldn't build my budget around that. Around a used equipment. I've just had so many bad experiences with used equipment that I'm always.
Yeah, I'm looking for the low barrier to entry and the exercise of getting my hands on the thing to see if this is good for me.
Yeah, it's just that you could end up in a situation where you're spending an enormous amount of time trying to fix something that would have been, and again, I'm always like, keep your elbows in. What can you do with just solid products? And if you can't do that yet, then just wait. Go ahead, Tony.
So as you said, Alex, I am using 10S Max. This was gifted to me by my son because it didn't work anymore. And so Talak showed me how, sent me a video on fixing the problem because it wasn't connecting. And I just stuck a toothpick in there and took out a piece of glass, and I've been using it ever since. And it's, it's tremendous improvement from the webcam that I was using.
Yeah.
And so now it is in the back of the teleprompter. I am using the Apple I'm using the Apple HDMI connector. I have not had to unplug it, move it, turn it off, or anything since I've been using it with this gifted teleprompter from office hours for 2 weeks now. I have not had to unpower it. It's not. We all know it's not a 6K, but I can hang in for a little while.
It totally looks good.
Longer.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy with it.
It's a great way to take a thing off the list of things you need to buy if you have an old iPhone. Throwing it in there is.
And the value of it is, I think, like $250 or $300 used. And so it's and I did put together my own 5K system, and it is the key to it right now is the iPhone. And so I started out with a $150 2012 MacBook Pro as my basis for being able to participate in office hours.
Right.
And I am very close to a $5,000 system right now.
Yeah, and it's great.
It's amazing. And thank you all for a conversation with Tony Mobley and the support.
Speaking of conversation with Tony Mobley, who are you talking to tonight?
I am talking to Linda McMillan, who is a regional vice president for a company that does child protective services, but it's a for-profit. She used to be regional director here in Georgia and had a similar position as deputy commissioner for child protective services in Texas, and now works with a private agency. And we're going to be talking about child welfare in the midst of COVID and just what things are going to be going on moving forward in this arena, because it's not something that's talked about. We're so focused on all the other things. We're not talking about how children are suffering and what services are out there to help the parents and the people actually doing the work with the children.
That's great. And that's at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Next question.
Next one comes from our own TJ Asher in Minneapolis, and TJ says, I'm intrigued by DMX lights since they can be less flickery at lower power than something like a Philips Hue bulb. Can the panel recommend some budget-friendly DMX lights that can also be controlled via network apps like Isadora and Universe?
All right, go ahead, John.
So I went down this path and spent many hours last summer learning about fixtures, etc. All my colored lights, the pink and the green one here, are American DJ. American DJ seems to have super low end, kind of a mid end, and some upper stuff. The middle of the road ones, the pink and the green one, are nice fixtures. They're a couple $100, but they have ones for $100. I use them for backlights, the cheapos. But my white lights are expensive. They're ICANNs and they're DMX. But look at American DJ for budget friendly stuff.
Great, Bill.
Yeah, interestingly enough, some of the stuff I'm putting in my new system comes from Elation, which is another disco or DJ company, and they have a lot of clever little things that fix things when you're presenting in lights, a lot of switchability and the ability to turn things on and off and sequence them and whatever. The other thing I just wanted to note, though, is if you're dimming a light and it's flickering, the other option is to just turn it up all the way so that it doesn't flicker and use some neutral density gel in front of it. All the gel vendors sell quarter stop, half stop, full stop neutral density. So you might be able to get the results you're looking for and eliminate the flicker on an inexpensive light by just keeping it up full and putting a gel in front of it rather than trying to dim it.
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, Bill basically nailed my point. DMX isn't by itself a superior light. It's just that it's hard to make a light that's really inexpensive that also adheres to DMX, which is just a control like MIDI standard. So to that end, neutral density is gonna really help you there.
All right, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I noticed that when I set my shutter at a 60th, my hue, the blue behind me is hue lights. If I change the shutter to a 50th, it goes away.
Yeah, because it's in cycle. As soon as it gets the two of them are on that cycle,
Yeah.
you have to go a little bit slower than they are to make that work. Yeah. So and remember that you know whether you use an NTEC or DMX King, you'll need something that takes the IP to the to DMX to the XLR 5 pin 30 pin. Next question.
JHB in New York says, would you prefer a fixed camera with a zoom lens or a PTZ, pan tilt zoom camera?
I will always get a fixed camera with a zoom lens because at the price that you're talking about, I don't think there's any ones that I would buy. And there's no PTZ camera that I would buy under $5,000. I think the one that I'm most interested in is the Canon 1-inch 4K that I still haven't gotten to test yet. But at $5,000, that's one camera. But I think that chip size matters, in my opinion, and everything under $5,000 is 2/3 or smaller. And I don't like to look at it. Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, I've most recently been given access to the use of a bird dog. I see the value of it, but if we're trying to stay within that $5,000 budget, it may not be the priority at this point. But boy, they're sweet. But hit click, set goes to a different location. Click goes to the different location.
I've owned lots of PTZs, so it's not that I don't, so I've owned a set of 4 Panasonic 120s. I've a set of 4 BRC 900s, a set of 5 where I had Blackmagic, Ursas sitting on top of telemetrics with Cabrillo lenses. So I love PTZ cameras. Like I love the fact that I can have what I think is a perfect mix is you have a handful of cameras that are PTZ, and then the ones that matter are hand operated by operators. And I feel like that mix gives you it also makes it oftentimes more intimate when we don't have a lot of people in the room. So a lot of reasons I do it is because I've had small studios and I want to have the people talking to each other, focused on each other and not being distracted by people around them. And so I love PTZs that way. So I've had lots of PTZs. I just, even on the larger ones that are 10 grand or more, I haven't been that happy with the quality of the video. It's like when I really want the video to look good, and what I'd rather do in a $5,000 studio is have one camera that looks great, rather than a bunch of cameras that look okay. Next question.
Jesse Mills, our friend in San Francisco in the Bay Area, says, what options would you lean toward for network switches capable of dealing with Dante, NDI, power over Ethernet, with lots of ports within a 5K studio?
Go ahead, Rupert.
If you are using those protocols, then inevitably you're going to be dealing with VLAN, so you're going to need to be in the managed switch realm. You could again look at the Netgear stuff, specifically the AV range that they have now. But again, if you want a system you can grow into and lean that way, then again, Ubiquiti would be a good choice, particularly in the budget. We can often talk about Meraki, but that would be, up there in price. But,
and it keeps coming. Like
right.
It's just, you keep on getting bills. Every year you're like, what?
Right. So something that's important of making this choice though is, making choices of any hardware is what kind of support is available, whether that be from the manufacturer or other support resources like after hours and office hours and after hours. You'll probably find that things like Ubiquiti or maybe the Netgear is the stuff that there's going to be most familiarity with here to get support from the community if you need it.
Absolutely. Jason?
As long as you are not connecting other things to the network, Ubiquiti will work out of the box, at least in my experience, with Dante and NDI. As long as it's not plugged into anything else, I need to say that again, it's going to work straight away.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, Roscoe, before we went live today, mentioned that it is Jesse's birthday, and I think it's very sneaky that he didn't show up for us to sing him the song.
Yeah, there we go. Calling him out, Doug.
So by experience, I run 2 networks. So I use Unify for everything else. In Dante, I use Cisco switches. So to me, separating those 2 things has solved so many problems. You don't have to know networking deep in the weeds in the VLAN world and all that mess. And for me, and if you're doing a studio, things aren't going to move around and you're going to just have, your switches in place. But for me, separating them, Cisco for Dante, Unify for everything else.
Yeah, and probably going to put Ubiquity into my system. I mean, that's kind of where I'm leaning with PoE, and I'd rather have something that I have to work through and figure out and work with all of you. I'm not a network engineer, so there'll be a lot of after hours of me going, why can't I do this? I don't understand this interface. So you guys will all get to grow with me as I figure this out. But I've decided I'm going to try to engineer it myself, and I'm going to get those. So stay tuned for that mess. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what would you recommend for a mic arm in a $5,000 setup?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I know a lot of people here don't like the spring-loaded ones, but that's what I'm using. I got it from Rode Microphones, and it's worked well for 3 years so far. So I recommend the Rode spring-loaded microphone arm. Bill?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, I've had a couple over the course of time. I'm with a spring-loaded too, but it's an OWC. It's their midline. It's not the expensive one that Alex has. It looks really nice, but I don't care what it looks like. I just want it to be movable, to stop where I put it and not move anywhere from that. But there's just so much action in this area because so many people are doing work from home. So even the newer ones, which will wear out much faster than any of these professional things, at least will do the job while you're getting going. So there's a lot of space.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm using the same one that Alex is, the OC White, which is definitely not in the spec. But the Heil PL2T is an excellent desk mount, and I think it's maybe $200, $100.
Yeah, one of the ones that people seem to be really happy with that have gotten them are the Wave mic arm low profile. So that's the Elgato mic arm. I don't know if anyone on the panel has that right now, but that seems to be the less expensive version for a lot of us that have the OC White, which is definitely out of the price. Not something I would get if I was doing $5,000 studio. Maybe $15,000 I might get one, but I wouldn't get one for this. But a lot of people, it doesn't seem to have quite the same level of flexibility, but pretty close.
Looks very similar though.
And a third the price. Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
With the Wave low profile, it's the low profile part is the important part because the regular Wave is just a regular boom, and the low profile is the underslung kind of version.
Yeah, and I highly recommend an underslung. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when would you recommend an ATEM Mini Extreme versus a Mini Pro in a $5,000 studio?
Go ahead, Ari.
Short answer, always. Longish answer, it depends, because you see, when you start going on the road of virtual production, and depending on where you are, you might start switching zoom, different spotlighting, stuff like that. Then you might go for an ATEM Mini Pro with just one camera to get into the world of HDMI. Then you figure, oh, I can do a 3-camera shoot, and that's really, really cool when you can, let's say, go on premise and give the different angles, stuff like that. Then you get into comping, then you get into graphics. Ultimately, you will end up with the ATEM Extreme and Mix Effect. So just go out and buy it.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
If you need more than one DVE, you are going to go with the Extreme. If you need more than 4 inputs, you're going to go with the Extreme. Those are the two that I think will end up pushing you over the edge.
If push came to shove, you might be able to go down to a Pro for a while, but you will run out of inputs eventually. Like it's just one of those things. Like, and again, you can't, all the super sources and everything else come with the Extreme, and the ability to record all those ISOs is so much value in that one box. It's quite a thing. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles is up next. I see the Linsole headphones on your lists. What model, and can you elaborate on what makes this headphone a good choice?
Are these the ones that, there's a couple different ones, that these are the ones that are, yeah, that's the one you're using there, that Chris, you're using, you're really happy with them. Are those the ones that you can hear everything? Like absolutely everything?
Let me tell you about that, Alex. It's interesting you mentioned that. So you bought a pair of these and you put them on one morning, and in the pre-show, you were like, this is crazy. I hear everything. And you had to change.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you were experiencing is that they're super sensitive.
Yeah.
And they run much hotter. When I take these, when I'm done with office hours and I take these off, I put my headphones on because I have to really work. I have to gain up quite a bit. I have to turn up my volume quite a bit. I turn it down a lot for these. So they're sensitive. And I guess it's different impedance, whatever, that makes them louder. Right. But I would try them again. I think they're.
I gave them to my daughter. She needed them. She's like, I need in here for my band practice, and I was like, I got some for you.
I really like them, and I think that if you had turned them down, you would have had a totally different experience.
Actually, I'll do another pass.
They're super loud.
Yeah. Next question.
Rodrigo in Stockholm, Sweden is up next. He says that in general, bigger sensors are better than smaller ones. Would switching from a GH5 Micro Four Thirds to a 1-inch camcorder like the Panasonic CX350, and he has a link there, increase the image quality, or is the advantage in the camera's lens?
Go ahead, Guy.
It's both. So the GH5 is going to be, the larger sensor because 4/3, it's over 1 inch. So the benefit of the CX350 is something like this, where you have the zoom rocker and the lens built in, but the image quality, if you were to put them side by side, the GH5 with a decent lens, especially at 12 to 35, is going to look way better. The things that you get are really nice autofocus, the ability to zoom in, get XLR, unless you get the adapter for a GH5, but XLR built in, and the ability to run the thing for a long time with the batteries that are that form factor for the CX350. So it just depends on what you want. I mean, if you're running and gunning, so I opened up the Hollyland, and this is what it looks like all mounted. So Alex, to answer your question, it does have 3 power options. So it does have USB-C, so you can get a power brick that you'd use for your phone and run it for way more than 8 hours. And then it's got the 12 volt to do DTAP, and then it's got an NP Sony style battery. So 3. With
really
3,
cool.
You'd be able to go for a long time.
It's really cool. Yeah, I got to test one. What I usually want to do when they say 1,000 feet is we immediately go out and do 1,000 feet, then we do through walls, then we do around corners, then there's a whole series of things that we usually test when someone says it's going to go a certain distance.
I'll send this one to you. Just
okay. We'll do a test. We'll do a second hour, or maybe a piece of a second hour where we run off and do that, or we'll do. I don't know if it's worth a whole second hour, but it'd be worth doing a 10-minute test during the first hour. So, or maybe even after hours. We'll see. But yeah, we should. What we should do is we should do it in after hours, and then we should have someone ask a question in office hours, and we can just give people an update of when it broke. Maybe someone can record it so that I can record it, and then we'll play when it fell apart and how far away it was. And yeah, so send it down, and we'll throw it into the test. Next question.
Rupert McRae is up next, and he says, with the hardware choices discussed, is there an ideal time of year to buy the 5K Studio, keeping in mind manufacturer release cycles?
Normally, we would have said, don't buy anything between February 1 and April 15th. That's usually the time that you just stop. At this point, no idea. Here's what I would say is, if you're trying to tax write-off, then, by the way, if you're starting a company, always set your tax write-off for June 30th because it's so much nicer than having to compete with everybody else. Just so many companies shift off their year end is some odd odd quarter. Makes it much easier because you're not dealing with the tax season with everybody else. So anyway, but so December, obviously you don't have a choice. But I wouldn't buy. I feel like Blackmagic has to release more things. I just feel like December and January have to be more things being released. I feel like they must have been waiting for IVC that they're not doing anymore. So that's all I would say. Go ahead, Sky.
Circumstantially, I ended up with some income and waited, and Black Friday was a friend to me, and Cyber Monday. So maybe, but I also didn't buy what they were telling me they wanted me to buy. I was waiting for that time of a deal for the value. And then I got free shipping, et cetera, things like that, cables.
One of the things that's kind of useful is having a hierarchy of what you want to buy. What do I actually need? And having that hierarchy either written down or in a spreadsheet. I had I think I've told this story before, so I'll keep it really quick, but we worked with a partner that they worked in a very large broadcast corporation, and they had a spreadsheet of everything they needed in order with all the prices going down. And they had this little calculation where they just select what they wanted and go down and find the right price. And so what would happen at the end of the quarter is someone would go, we're trying to spend $400,000. They just put it out to the company, if you're going to buy something, buy it now, because we're trying to get under something for taxes or whatever. And they would just scroll down and send it back in a minute. And they always had everything they wanted because they always knew exactly what they needed. And so they were able to just respond quickly. And in the same way, by having that list, I know I have kind of a hierarchy of things that I want. When I see it on sale, I'll go buy it, but I don't buy stuff because if they're not on that hierarchy, I just go, well, I need to think about that for a little while.
And that's the discipline side of things. So that's brilliant.
I always go shopping twice. I'm one of those people that I'll always look at something and then I walk away and I think about it for a while and then I come back and buy it, or I don't come back and buy it. But I almost never buy anything the first time I see it unless I need it like for a production and I'm just solving problems. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, for the most part, I just buy things when I need them. The exception this year was at Monoprice. This is $150 worth of analog cable that I don't actually necessarily need, but I get sick of wiring studios and needing, a tiny little this to that.
Right.
So there it is, $150, usually maybe 400.
That's great. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is kind of on the same line here. He says, what would be the rule of thumb to budget for cables and infrastructure in the 5K studio?
Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to laugh and say, pick a number and then it's going to be anywhere between 2 and 6 times that, because there are always so many tiny little things that you forget about. And you say, oh gosh, I put it together, it works, but the cables look terrible. So then you go into cable ties and you go into looms and stuff to make things look good underneath. And you're buying more stuff for the label makers. And just by the time you actually get it done, you always spend way more than you thought.
My wife ran the finances for my last company, and I, and so I remember when we moved into DC, I said, we're not going to spend more than $50,000 on this setup. She reminded me of that when we crossed 500,000. Like it was like you remind. But I was like, but it made a lot of money too. Like it wasn't all like it's made money. It's paying itself off, but it was ugly. You just kept on going. Oh, I need that. Oh, I'm gonna need that. Go ahead, John.
When I did my Studio C over here, where Fenwick was broadcasting from, I was amazed at, and I totaled up all the Manfrotto arms and the auto pulls and all that stuff. I'm just doing a calculation here. It's in between 10 and 20% infrastructure costs.
Yeah,
cables and all that stuff.
The one thing I will say is that if you feel like you're technical enough, making SDI cables saves you a crazy amount of money and lets you build things exactly the way you want them. So, and generally anything under 75 feet, when you think about studios, you can get the thin, like 22 gauge wire, 20, and it just saves so much money. It's just such a ripoff to buy those. Next question.
Ruben McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next. With what teleprompter or Interatron options would be included in the 5K studio?
Well, I can tell you that I have decided that I'm not spending $2,500 on a 24-inch one, and I'm going to build one out of MakerPipe. So that's my we'll be talking about that probably next week, but I'll lay it out over the weekend. But I'm gonna build one. I'm not gonna buy one because I'm not gonna buy $2,500 for a piece of glass. Go ahead, Ari.
I have got this Chinese one. It's a TS310, whatever, about $400, and I put an iPad in it. It comes with a travel case, very, very sturdy. I've taken it on many shoots offsite, and I use it in the studio as well. So it works fine.
That's great. That's great. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, what mic would you recommend for the 5K studio?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, I would go with the one I'm using right now, the AT2020, and then an Apogee Duet 3 converter. If I wanted to go strictly USB, John has a really nice microphone that he recommends. It's got USB and XLR on it. But also you could take a look at the Apogee Hype mic. The reason I say that is because it has a built-in compressor built right into it. And it's the only analog compression microphone out there that I know of.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, traditionally we see a lot of the Sennheiser G4s, and that comes with a kind of a cheap mic. It's the ME2. The stock mic isn't very good, but it seems to be probably the most popular wireless over the last few years. I would replace that stock mic with something like a Sanken COS 11D, and that adds another $300, but that would be my go-to because everybody uses it.
I think if I wasn't going to try to do really good audio and I was just trying to get something that would sit, then I could be in again, at $5,000, I wouldn't be trying to walk around. I'd be like, this is what I have right now. And I would probably lean towards an MV7. If I'm not going to get a mix pre with noise assist and a PR40 or a headset mic or something like that, I would immediately just pull back into an MV7 and save the money, and have something that I can still add XLR later. But I have something that's just USB and it cuts out a whole bunch of expense, related to that. Next question.
And the last one in the regular queue this morning says from Rodrigo in Stockholm, Sweden. And he says, how do I join after hours?
By the way, these are questions. We'll answer this one right now, but these are great questions for Friday. Is when you're thinking about stuff today, think about on Friday, all the things you have questions about, like how do you join after hours and where are the like all those things. I know we're very mysterious, but this is a good way to get caught up. Anyway, go ahead, Rupert.
Leave the official directions are up and down the hill over the rickety bridge or something like that. But I think if you're signed up in Zoom, you may find a link in the confirmation email, maybe.
It's up the mountain, across the rickety bridge, and through the dangerous forest. Like that. That's how we let you.
Second star to the right and straight on till morning, I think.
Exactly. You have to
bring
get
your
past
sniper pellet.
You got to get past the bear and the alligator and the lion. And then you're there. All right. That was a fun conversation. Great questions from our producers. I think it's good. It's a good thought experiment. I think we probably need to do someone, probably not immediately, but something under 1,000 just to kind of really get into that, kind of work through those things. So we just kind of I think it's just a good thought process for us to keep thinking through. So yeah, more of that. And great contributions from the panelists. Thanks again for coming and contributing your knowledge and your conversation to this fine show. And yeah, so remember, tomorrow we'll be doing an office hours update and tell you how things are going and where we're at and what we're finding. And then Friday, of course, we'll talk about getting the most out of it, like how to join after hours and all those other fun things on Friday. So stay tuned for that. All right, now we're going to jump into after hours.